Well, hello again, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Willis Wit and Wisdom. I'm Eric Willis,
And I'm Bob Willis.
and together we're the Willi, or
That's
something.
right.
Well, Dad, it's another episode where we get to answer a question from someone who has written in, and this comes from the heart of somebody who has lost a person close to them, and there's some processes that they're going through, and the question really is, how can I forgive myself? I don't have the context for that question, but that's a great question.
Right. And that is the question that came in. Someone was struggling with something that happened in the past, and they're having a hard time forgiving themselves over that. They think they've forgiven other people involved, but it's forgiving self. What kind of input do you have on that, E?
Yeah, well, whenever I'm coaching and counseling folks on forgiveness, I ask them what they believe first and foremost about forgiveness. Forgiveness from a spiritual perspective, and as a believer in Jesus, we realize that forgiveness is not optional, it's a command. So scripture is pretty clear that we are to forgive others. We get that part. It's a command to forgive. This concept of forgiving self, though, I don't find that in scripture. However, what I do find is that we are to live in the forgiveness that we already have because of the cross and because of Christ.
Right.
When we choose to forgive, whether we're choosing to forgive our own behaviors or thoughts or words or attitudes, or forgive other people, forgiveness is basically my reflecting what God and how God has already treated me. So forgiveness is reflecting how God has treated you. You're forgiven. Therefore, we can choose to forgive other people, and we can even choose not to live in the shame and the guilt of our past behaviors or attitudes or thoughts. So forgiving self is from my perspective, it's really a paradigm shift in thinking about forgiveness. It has already been given to you, and you reflect it to other people. So that's what scripture teaches us to do, is to forgive others. As far as forgiving myself, I must be reminded to live in the forgiveness that I already have because of Christ and the work on the cross. But there are processes associated with that. How do you move forward and live in that forgiveness? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I'm leading a grief support group and that question comes up about forgiveness, I have a definition of forgiveness I like to share with someone in a grief group. Forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different yesterday. So what took place 24 hours ago or 24 years ago will never be any different. So basically, forgiveness is a choice of letting it go, releasing those emotions and feelings instead of carrying them. It's just like revenge is a choice. If someone has done something to me, I make a choice, and I can do some planning, and I'll make a choice to have revenge. Well, I believe forgiveness is that same choice. I choose to forgive that person. Forget it? No. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Okay. Throughout the scripture, God's always telling his children, remember when, remember when. So God doesn't say we should forget things, but we learn from those things. And I believe that's where we make progress in the Christian life, is learning from our experiences, that we go through. Same way with forgiveness. But forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different yesterday. As long as we're just sitting there hoping it'll change and hoping it'll be different, that'll never happen. Okay. We can't hope, but I think it's a choice to release those feelings, the emotions, and not let them control us. I have a choice if I want to carry it as a load or not, or if I want to leave it behind. And I, of course, as a Christian, I depend on the Lord to take that burden and take that pain, and in His place give me peace. And I think that's the opposite that I look for in forgiveness, is give me a peace in that area. I don't have to carry that anymore.
No, that's great. That's great. And I love your definition of forgiveness. Giving up the hope of a different yesterday. Did I hear that correctly?
That's right. A different or a better yesterday. Have to give it up.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. And you also touched on something I want to mention. the difference between forgiving and forgetting. A lot of times we've been raised to think, well, if I forgive someone, then I just need to forget it and everything needs to be back like it was, or it needs to be better than it was before, relationally speaking. There is a difference between forgiving, reconciling, and restoring. Those are three
Right.
different concepts. And a lot of times people hesitate to choose to forgive or live in the forgiveness that they already have because of Christ. They forget and they hesitate to forgive because they think that if I forgive, that means the relationship needs to be better or stronger or exactly the same way it was.
Mhm.
That's restoration, and that's a totally separate concept.
Right.
So forgiveness, there's a lot to it conceptually. There's a difference between forgiveness, reconciliation, and restoration. We can talk about that in a future episode probably.
Mhm.
But forgive and forget. I love that you brought out the fact that those are different. That we're not going to forget. As a matter of fact, I've had people challenge me when I tell them that. They
Mhm.
said, "Well, didn't God say that we're to forgive and forget?" And I said, "No, not that I can recall."
Right.
Um,
It's kind of
he,
like the Bible doesn't say, "Don't cry over spilt milk."
yeah, that's
Yeah,
not a concept.
it's not in there.
Yeah, the when Scripture talks about and God saying, um, "I forgive and choose not to remember it anymore." It's not I forgive and forget. So the Scripture there is God saying, because He doesn't have a faulty memory. He's
Right.
perfect. You know,
You're pretty sharp on that.
he's on top of it. And so um, he doesn't say forgive and forget. He says forgive and choose not to remember anymore. That is a
Choice.
choice on our part. So,
Right.
so
Right.
that's
I agree with what you're saying, E. I sure do. It's
uh,
a choice that we make, whether I want to pick that up when I wake up in the morning, if I want to grab that again and carry that load all day, or I choose to let it go, put it away.
and
That
I,
way it's not controlling me. Yeah.
yeah, and I can imagine that someone who is grieving, who has lost a loved one, and their last conversation was one that they wish they could take back.
Right. That
They said
happens.
some
Yeah.
things, words came out, and there's this grief upon grief, an
Mhm.
added grief because of this. What do you say? Those
Right.
are the
Right. In fact,
individuals that.
yeah. And I encourage people to write those things down. If you could talk to them again, write down what you would forgive them for. I mean, just be as explicit as you need to be because it's your words that you're putting it out. And when we write those things down, our grief becomes mourning. And so we're able to mourn that grief part of it and express it. Again, it comes back to a choice of letting go of the feelings or holding on to them. So I encourage people to write those things down if you could talk with them again, because I think that's the healthy part. If we're going to write something down, we almost have to organize it a little bit in order for it to come out. And we can organize it, refine it some more when it does come out. That's my encouragement to people who have a hard time with forgiveness. Is let's write them a letter. Okay, let's write it down because that way we're expressing it instead of just holding on to that burden.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, it's great advice like that that puts you in a space of, I'm not going to call you an expert, even though you are, because I know you're too humble to accept that, but you know what you're talking about in this area of grief and caregiving and loss. And so much so that you've written another book. You want
I
to,
did.
yeah, tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that.
I did. Yeah, I just happen to have a copy of it.
Well, look at that.
Yeah, Jesus, the crucified caregiver. The crucified caregiver. Probably about 100 pages based upon the sayings of Christ from the cross. When Christ was on the cross, he was on his deathbed. So what he said from his deathbed is very important. So there are 7 sayings of Christ on the cross, and each one of those can relate to caregiving and caregivers. If you think about it, he took care of others while he was on the cross. He took care of those who crucified him. He forgave them. Okay,
Mm,
even from the cross. And for the guy next to him, the thief on the cross, he was taking care of his spiritual needs. He said, "Today you're going to be with me in paradise." Now, at the foot of the cross was his mom with a broken heart. he took care of his mom, made sure she was taken care of. He took care of John, said, John, here's a duty for you, take care of my mom. So he was rolling through that caregiving even while he was on the cross. But yep, I have a book just came out last week. It's on Amazon.com. People can order it. Or they can contact me at rwillis14@cox.net, and I will give them a signed copy and get that to them. Okay.
All right. And the name of the book again, for those who are going to be searching on Amazon?
Right. It is Jesus, the Crucified Caregiver.
Jesus, the
Some guy named Bob
Crucified
Willis.
Caregiver. Yes, by another Willis.
Caregiver. Right.
Yeah. All right, Dad. Any last words as we wrap this episode up? This one went rather quickly today.
All right. Just what people are feeling with that forgiveness and wrestling with that forgiveness, that's very normal. It's very normal. It doesn't mean that they're going off the edge or anything. It's such a normal response because, especially in grief, when a relationship ends, we replay that relationship in our mind and we'll think about things that I wish I had not done that, or conflicts in that relationship, and we wonder about forgiveness. And even though we struggle with it, it does not mean that that we're going to go off the edge. It's very normal for us to have those feelings of forgiveness and wondering, and regret some things.
Yeah, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, right?
Oh, exactly. We grieve a loss of any of those.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Good word, Dad. Thanks. And thank you for joining us again. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel at the link below. And don't forget to send in your questions that we can answer for you. Swing by Amazon, pick up a copy of Dad's book, email him, and he'll be happy to sign that for you. And we're glad that you came along this journey with us. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Right. Great. Thanks, folks.